Okay, I think we're going to kick off in a moment here.
Yeah. What company are you with?
AnyClip.
AnyClip. What's AnyClip do?
And if anyone out there has seen Steve Ehrlich, let us know. But otherwise, I think we won't wait for him, and we'll just get started.
It'll be a surprise.
What's that? Not really.
He's going to tell me what they do.
Come on in, have a seat.
You always well prepared with the notes. I remember that.
Because we're a marketing person, so she goes, this stuff.
All right, so let's kick off. If it's too noisy back there, if someone could shut the door, that would be great. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Excellent. All right. We are here to talk about video everywhere, technologies and platforms, enabling the next generation of over-the-top TV. Now, I don't want you to worry because it says technology and platforms. This isn't a technology-focused panel. We're going to be talking about things like consumer behavior, disruptions to the value chain, new business models, platforms as a enablement for that, and what the opportunities and challenges are. And we're going to start by going down the panelists that are here. And if you could each introduce yourself and your company and how you fit into the value chain, that would be great. Peter, you want to start us off?
Sure. My name is Peter Ward, and I'm coming from Verizon Digital Media Services. Verizon Digital Media Services is a few years old, a division within the innovation group within Verizon, and the vision is really to enable the next generation ecosystem for television to really support what I think all our kids want, which is any content, any device, anytime, anywhere. And that type of experience is just not supported by the satellite ecosystem that's been in existence the last 40 or so years. So we're an end-to-end system that takes the content right from the distributor all the way to the consumer device. And my role within that has kind of been a business planning role and strategy. So,
great.
I'm Dave Cornell. I'm with Deluxe Digital Distribution. If you're familiar with Deluxe, Deluxe is a large company, lots of divisions. Our division's about 3 years old. And the focus for Deluxe Digital Distribution is to really simplify the whole workflow for how do you manage content, whether you're a service provider or an OTT service. If you start looking at the requirements in that market today to manage how you're going to provide that content to all the different devices in the market, all the work involved as you get into multiple language packs if you're going internationally and abroad, and you want to simplify your footprint on your CDN storage, all those headaches that any service provider or OTT provider is going to have, we take off. So we use the word end-to-end as well, but everyone uses a different form, a different means. Ours is end-to-end content workflow from managing the receipt of those assets from any content provider all the way through anything required to actually streaming that to the device.
Great.
And my role over there is SVP of Business Development for the team.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Sudhir Kaushik. I'm with Uyala. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the company. I run product management for Uyala. We're based in the Bay Area. The company is about 7 years old now, founded by folks who left to Google at the time when YouTube was sort of gaining popularity. And what we do is we provide an end-to-end platform for media companies, broadcasters, and operators to really create engaging video experiences around their content. So we do, again, I'm going to use end-to-end again in a different context. This is all the way from the content ingestion to the asset management to the playback experiences on the different devices that we support. But our core value proposition and our core sauce, given sort of the Google DNA, has always been around analytics. So it's been around providing real-time insights into content, audience, and advertising, and partnering with all the top ad networks out there. But yesterday we acquired an ad platform, Video Plaza, in Europe. So pretty soon we will sort of be serving our own ads through our own ad server, but that's really what we do. Today, we power up to a few billion streams daily, reaching about 250 million uniques. So if you go to espn.com and watch any video that's been delivered through Yala, other customers that we have are Univision, DirecTV, Foxtel, Telstra, to name a few.
So you work with the Aussies?
That's right. My accent is not quite there yet, but yeah.
It's going to get there.
We'll work on it later. Ilo, good afternoon. I'm Gavin Goodbeck. I'm head of content at AnyClip Media. AnyClip Media is a large digital distribution network. We're based in Jerusalem, Israel, with offices in New York, London, and Los Angeles. We started about 6 years ago with the idea of being able to search for any moment inside a feature film or any other kind of premium content and share those moments with your friends. So what the company did traditionally was we signed deals with major Hollywood studios, Universal and Warner Brothers, just to name a couple. And we developed a system for extracting metadata. And so we have a very advanced system for extracting metadata, understanding what's going on in any moment of any movie or TV program or any content, frankly. And what we did a couple of years ago is we decided, as opposed to just having a consumer-facing website, we were going to distribute that content online. So we developed our own proprietary player which has intelligence in it. And now those players are seen each month on about 200,000 websites all over the world to about 75 million unique users. And we are able to match the context of the website with the clips from the premium content that we show. We monetize that through in-stream advertising, and that's what we do.
Excellent. And John?
Good afternoon. I'm John Petruccelli. I'm CEO of Bulldog Digital Media. We facilitate and optimize premium live content experiences across all connected device platforms, which is somewhat of a longer way of saying we bring the Red Bull Stratus effect to these premium digital experiences, which we do through best practices my team and I have cultivated and curated over the last 8 years in this market segment. So I ran a live streaming technology company that I sold into AEG, who's the world's largest presenter of live music and live sports, at the end of 2009. And we powered almost every premium experience in the live streaming market you could think of. The Grammys, the Oscars, Masters, the E3, TED Conference, as well as all of MTV's live experiences that fed into their broadcast. Prior to being acquired and through that acquisition, I had socialized this concept to YouTube of delivering big premium experiences to draw big audiences to the YouTube platform, but to also expose that audience base to those assets. And as that business grew, we started to see trends in massive consumption on mobile platforms, but also, off the chart viewer duration times for things like concerts and music festivals. So a group of us went out about 2 years ago to form this company to work with all the stakeholders in that ecosystem: brands, agencies, content owners, distribution platforms, and also we specialize in music festivals, multi-day experiences like Red Bull just powered with Lollapalooza and Austin City Limits.
Great, thank you. And I'm Jonathan Hurd, a director with Altman Vlandry and Company. We're a 100-person firm with offices, strategy consulting firm, with offices in Boston, New York, and San Francisco, and we're focused on communications and media. So this panel is apparently being live webcast. So if you're watching, thank you for joining. And there isn't a facility for people who are watching to lob in questions, but I'm going to try an experiment. I'm going to give my email address, and we'll see if anyone emails with questions. JHURD, jhurd, @altville, ALTVIL.com. So if you're watching, we'll see if anyone emails any questions in. All right, so let's start with the consumer experience. And speaking about video everywhere, you mentioned, Peter, at the very beginning, the reality of what viewers today want, video when I want it, where I want it, et cetera. What are the barriers today to that perfect consumer experience of watching video everywhere on your own terms? And so what are the major things that aren't fulfilling that ideal scenario today?
I think most of it is a rights problem a business problem rather than a technology problem. But I think we're starting to see just from, I think we've all done this, or many of us have done this panel now multiple times, as in, like 6 or 8 times. And I think we always
So you know my questions.
Yeah. So I think we a lot of times we say, so what's changed in the last 6 months or what's changed in the last year? And I think this past 6 months from the business, from the rights perspective, probably had the most, positive movement within my recent memory. Just in that we've seen some, some precedents now set with Dish in the rights that they have now with Disney, and then also the Viacom rights that have been given to Sony. And we're seeing things that I can't talk about that obviously get our CEO and chairman have talked about in vague terms about what we're planning to launch next year in terms of a mobile-only virtual MVPD. But there is, I think, it's coming, and those kind of favored nations deals that have been in effect and have been kind of hard to break. Now we're getting those molds broken, and I think that's the first step towards getting to what people want in terms of something that isn't the current paradigm, which is, it's stuck on my set-top box. It's 500 channels. It's only available on a program grid or on a DVR that sits, on 3 set-top boxes that I have to rent for $10 a piece, which is not generally what, what we want and what our children, how at least my 3 kids don't really know how to use a set-top box. And you kind of joke that it's as foreign to them as, the rabbit ears and the remote from the 60s, was to us, at least me, the, of way too many channels, on a set-top box from your cable company. So I think there's change afoot, but still business rights issues are the biggest challenge, more so than I think the technological challenges. So that's my perspective.
I think that I agree with that. I think the technology challenge is really a money challenge. It's just, it's all solvable. You look at what's happening and you look at some of the trends and the types of content that's going to be coming out with 4K and even Dolby Vision and other things of that nature that people are going to want when they see it. Those end up being just challenges of the cost of getting that content to the device. So it's all solvable, but I think one of the key things, not to put a plug in for Deluxe, is one of the things we do is by having a large cloud platform where we end up managing end-to-end for that customer, we have the capability that when they decide, hey, Apple's going to entertain putting our app on their device, I gotta use FairPlay, I need an HLF variant. We can actually take, because we're managing all their content, and we're doing 4 million minutes a week right now of content reprocessing. We can actually take their entire library and move that to those variants within a couple of weeks. So one of the things is, if you're in the market today, you don't know what's going to be hot next month, where your opportunities will be on devices and platforms. And you need to make sure you're flexible, because it's always easy to look at your requirements today, budget it, and then find out that it's somewhat obsolete in 6 months. So I think there are challenges on the technology side. It's a money issue and it's all solvable, but you want to make sure that you approach it with more of a service model than building up capital infrastructure that you may need to continually pour money into.
So what about from a consumer perspective, though, with all of the different providers? You obviously have many different customers. There are many different platforms there, this fragmentation that exists. Who's going to bring that all together? And in fact, is that a problem for consumers? And are millennials just used to a fragmented world?
I can speak to that. In 2012, we were doing some live experiences for Coca-Cola on the YouTube platform. And there were there was one significant study by Intel and then almost a press release by the CFO. Intel said that as a society, we had 3 billion connected devices in 2012, projected to grow to 50 billion by 2020, with most of that growth starting and occurring from 2015 on. In parallel, we saw an announcement from the CFO of Coca-Cola saying, I'm going to pull away from traditional 30-second VOD ads on TV because of the DVR problem that we're having. We're going to put our money into live. So you'll see us on American Idol and the World Cup and the Olympics. We're also going to move more into digital. And those were two pretty significant developments. And also you have now the biggest section of our society happens to be 23 years old, and they simply don't consume content through traditional means. And they also seem to have multiple connected devices at their disposal or in their home or that they own. So it's going to be challenging to solve that fragmentation, but the ability to render that content and push it out and deliver it to those connected devices, and also tie in social networking and those types of services that enhance and optimize the experience can also be ways to reach those consumers for reach, but also have a brand come along and support that and advertise through that medium.
Yeah, and I think Facebook, obviously, Facebook's going to play a huge part in this. Facebook just launched Atlas recently, which is their platform, which actually they're actually going to be able to follow the consumer even to their offline purchase and things like that. So I think Facebook is going to be a center of bringing the content together, a place where people will be able to see the content. And I think that, content is, I read an article saying that content is today's water cooler event, right? And if content's today's water cooler event, then I think that, social and Facebook is actually the virtual water cooler, right? And so the fact that today shows will be able to be will succeed or fail very, very quickly depending on social input is a big deal. And I actually, if I can just digress 1 minute, I think from a point of view of consuming news as well, I think that this additional social element, makes news go viral very, very quickly. And in fact, it can cause, big swings in even geopolitics. And I think so all of this around social and, getting back to being around Facebook, I think this is a very, very important change in the way people are finding content, consuming content, and then, interacting with it.
Okay, well, let me, so talking about these barriers for consumers, summarizing a couple of points. One is content rights. And I guess I would say the confusion of where can I find something, on what service, in what time frame is it going to be available? Am I going to be able to see the latest episode or whatever? That's kind of a big mystery to consumers. The second thing is, with all this content out there, discovering it and having some point of aggregation. And Gavin, you're saying Facebook, you think, will be a major player there in terms of providing that aggregation and discovery of content.
I just heard a panel consumers. Like in the room next door where the gentleman said up to 80% of plays of premium content from major brands come through the Facebook interface. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's going to be a major deal. I just heard that now, and I was like, that's something.
Well, how do all right? So solving these challenges, and there are other, I think, for consumers. Even though the technology is supposedly solved, I would say from my personal video viewing on non-television devices and sometimes even televisions, that there are many still technology glitches, issues, ads that are too repetitive from, that as well as just buffering, et cetera, the list goes on. But, with all of those challenges, what are the major opportunities that still need to be addressed with video platforms today? And, and what barrier, how can you overcome some of these challenges for consumers?
So, I think just piggybacking on what Peter was saying around rights, a huge focus, or rather reason for the lack of adoption, has been how do you sort of even the playing field for the content owner, the advertiser, and the consumer, right? You have different players in the ecosystem focusing on maybe one or maybe two parts of that puzzle, right? And unfortunately, that doesn't create an even playing field. So there are a number of things happening that are actually accelerating or making that playing field a lot more even. So whether it's ease of technology, so the ease of deployment to multiple platforms. That's sort of reducing the time required to get as many devices live possible, more so than it was 4 or 5 years ago. There are other sort of developments around Nielsen ratings for mobile or Comscore ratings for mobile, which means that content owners now feel that they are getting attribution for some of the traffic. So we have customers where we have their 40-50% of their traffic on mobile devices, which really was not used when they went to Madison Avenue as part of their negotiation for figuring out how much they should be getting for their ad spend, right? So one of the big areas that, at least from an Uyala perspective, that we are really focused on is how do we sort of bring this ecosystem of content, audience, and advertising together from a data perspective, from a technology perspective, so that we can sort of even the playing field. So regardless of whether you're a publisher looking to sell your ad inventory directly, or whether you're an ad agency like WPP looking to figure out where do I get the 18 to 25 male, and in the TV world, regardless of how much a user watches, 18 to 25 male is identical. But reality is, if a male is watching 90% of the way of a given live stream, is a lot more valuable than somebody who switches off 10 minutes into viewing, right? So there are a lot of things that now we can do from a technology perspective, which really creates the right incentive for all the people in the ecosystem to participate and then sort of move content over these different devices and platforms. And as I think we always believe, move to a model where it's no longer about cannibalization and saying, are you taking people away from their TV, as they call it? But in our view, you're not really, because that's going to happen regardless. You're actually just increasing the pie, because unfortunately or fortunately, people are just watching more and more TV. And so you just need to take advantage of that and create the right sort of ecosystem to enable that.
So speaking of the multiple devices, and when tablets first came out and people realized, oh, I can have a tablet and I can watch TV, there's an opportunity for a new kind of entertainment experience with a companion device that is synced in some way to the content I'm watching. And there were experiments, Grey's Anatomy and others tried that. How do you view that as a opportunity, either for improving the consumer experience or for content providers and others to either generate more eyeballs or more subscription revenue or whatever? Do you view these devices as companions, as alternate viewing screens, as complementary, where if I'm watching on a tablet, it might stimulate TV viewing? How do all of you view the multiple devices today?
Well, I've seen broadcasters effectively use digital in both capacities. So MTV does the MTV VMAs. I've seen them deploy a live webcam of the build of the black carpet, which was basically installing a live stream basic camera, and they'll have 12,000 simultaneous people watching guys put the carpet down essentially. And that's an audience that they drive into the broadcast. Conversely, the Grammys and CBS have done a whole week of build up into the broadcast. So they'll live stream panels about the music industry, parties, and also show a lot of VOD content that the Recording Academy has acquired. So you'll see Marvin Gaye's 1970 Grammy acceptance speech. A lot of what they've done in that build up in social media is attributed to, they pointed to a 33% increase in the broadcast ratings. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that they changed their format to 12 amazing performances by the biggest artists in the world during the broadcast. But those networks and those brands capitalized on that kind of pre-advanced digital strategy that led into the broadcast. Same, with the Oscars. We've done shows for them. The pre-show for the Oscars is 6 different video feeds before the actual telecast. So you have the red carpet arrival, the fashion cam, the hosted cam. Then you can actually see some of the winners going through the winner's walk live streamed as the broadcast is going on, getting their statuette engraved, and then they go into the governor's ball. Real effective ways to capitalize on an audience that may not tune into the broadcast, or really now you've got them completely engaged, watching, from start to finish, from the digital stream into the actual broadcast.
The other sort of nuance here, from our perspective, since we have a pretty wide variety of customers on our platform, I think a few years ago, the tablet was really considered as a companion, as you said, because the publishers and broadcasters really assumed that the TV was the primary mode of consumption. So it's how do you augment that experience rather than replace? What we are increasingly finding is that a lot of the broadcasters are looking as tablet as a primary mode of consumption, because especially for live events and otherwise, you got to watch it if you're in a subway or you're at work. And so the TV, it's an even playing field from a device perspective. So when you have that mindset, you want to provide an uncluttered experience to the consumer, just as you would on television. And that's a lot of what we are seeing as well, is it has to be exactly as the person would watch. Same kind of ad experience, same kind of quality, all of that. You do have the opportunity to sort of augment that through live feeds or scores or stats and things like that. But I think that's a mind shift that has also happened. It's a little bit different than a few years ago.
I think, some of the second screen apps that I noticed seemed to be getting a lot of traction, were especially in Europe, like was in racing, Formula One racing, getting all the stats and information of the cars and stuff that are going on during the race. There's also a company that we ran into in Latin America that it was interesting. It was like a soap opera, and your second screen actually, during the show, you can be asking questions to the actors on the stage or their character, and someone was responding with, so you're actually asking them in character type of questions. And they were responding through text. So it was kind of trying to drive a simultaneous question, interaction with the actors, and they were seeing some pretty strong responses from that. But I think really the biggest second screen use is discovery. People are they're finding it easier to find content with the interfaces on their tablets or their phone, and then with Chromecast and other types of devices, they can flick it to their TV, and it just makes an easier way of discovering. Because I'll tell you, the set-top box discovery is painful.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, second screen, I think at first kind of hit as potentially the next big thing, maybe, I want to say like 3 years ago. Yeah. And I think we've been waiting. We know, like, whatever it is, 80% of people use a mobile or a tablet while they're watching TV. It's just that they're doing other things. They're tweeting and they're checking their Facebook updates and all that kind of stuff. And, do they want something that's so synchronized? I don't know. The jury's still out. It could still happen. I don't think over 3 years we know yet, but it hasn't like taken us by storm. So I think we're waiting. I think it's interesting, like on the Chromecast thing, that the concept of it as a remote may move forward, and that does tell you who's watching, which is something that is being solved other ways. Like now I know my Xbox. Anyone who's watching Netflix, in my family is saying, well, they want to log in as who they are. So they can watch what they were just watching and know what's on their list and all that kind of stuff. So Netflix kind of solved it a different way as far as knowing who's watching, which ironically is more important for an ad supported network than a subscription network. But, we're going to see different ways to approach it.
Well, Dave, you mentioned set-top box discovery. Traditional set-top box discovery is lacking in user experience. So what and let's talk about service providers, traditional pay TV providers. Over-the-top video or video delivered over the public internet is clearly a threat to them, but it's also potentially an opportunity. And I was wondering if you could give your perspectives on, how is it a threat? How is it an opportunity for traditional pay TV operators?
I start with the operator in the crowd.
Although you're not really yourself the operator.
Well, we're the back end for for FiOS and that kind of thing as well. So just to make sure I understand, you want to hear
how is it a threat and how is it an opportunity over the top?
Well, I think any last mile connection globally, whether whether you're a fixed access or mobile access, you're collecting revenue from a consumer for either two or three things. You're either saying, I'm going to provide you, I'm your internet service provider. I'm going to also offer you a video service, and then less and less, a telephone service as well. But that kind of triple play concept is central to most of the service providers. And I think that some service providers have taken the philosophy that we're just going to focus, we're agnostic. If we don't really long-term need to be the video service provider, we're going to be focusing on delivering the bits to the eyeballs. Others, who have a dominant share, I think, are much more interested in protecting that spot as being the aggregator of video content, and I think have taken a more aggressive role in terms of defending that turf against over-the-top competition. I think what's interesting, as you look over the long term, though, is that at the end of the day, you say over the top, the definition of it is delivered over the open internet, which is not really true. If you think about if you've been following all the Netflix news, I mean, what happens is, if Netflix wants to deliver to a tier 2 service provider, they say, hey, we're going to put this Open Connect streamer inside your network. And it might be at the head end level. It might even go down to the hub level, and there might be a bunch of them. And when it's so deep inside a service provider network, all of a sudden their performance goes through the roof, and they're delivering 4K, with a high degree of quality. And it's almost mimicking the way that, the rest of the video is being provided within that provider's network. If you think about the way it's provided to the tier 1s, it's at that kind of, at the last connection point to get inside that network, but it's being delivered within the service provider's network to the eyeballs. The problem is it's not being cached deep inside the network. And that issue is I think, over time will limit what Netflix can do inside the tier 1s, from a performance standpoint, from a 4K. And you kind of talk about buffering, all those other technology issues. But again, it goes back to the business. For me, the business underline of, well, you need to have that business relationship solved on some level to get to that performance level of having your caches deep inside a network, so that you can deliver the same, I think, quality and scalability that you have with that QAM infrastructure that supports the set-top box. So, did I answer your question? I just swirl around and then I forget.
I mean, it's certainly I'm not sure anyone gave a comprehensive answer to the question, but no, it was that was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. You have to. I guess the short answer is, if you're collecting revenue from a customer to be an internet service provider and a video service provider, you have to balance your response, because you can't just say, we want to be the highest performing for your Netflix and your Hulu and your over the top, because you're paying us money to be an internet service provider. So you have to, and I think you've seen that with Comcast and with Verizon. We were back to #1 in terms of Netflix after all this. So no one's trying. I think it's for everything that's been written about. Everyone wants to give the consumer the best experience they can get. At the end of the day, it's just that there's different businesses in it, and it'll be interesting how it plays out.
Well, as the other person on the panel Uyala is now owned by a telco.
That's true.
Which is the dominant telco down in Australia. To your question, I think a lot of the operators are looking at this as an opportunity, especially in markets where it's pre-Netflix, right? So they sort of see the writing on the wall that if we don't get our act together and really leverage the asset that we have, which is the subscriber billing relationship. We do have a relationship with the subscriber, with the household, and our entire business is predicated around aggregating content and providing that experience. How do we sort of evolve that experience to provide that to consumers? Because otherwise, we're going to be irrelevant. And so based on every conversation that we have had, it's been pretty, all of them look at this as an opportunity to get their house in order, to figure out how do we actually deliver the best experience. Otherwise, Netflix or somebody else would come and eat their share.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the cannibalism is a difficult concept for a millennial to grasp, and history dictates that when NBC put The Office on the internet, their ratings went up. The Daily Show was really discovered online and drew people to the actual broadcast. I've spent a lot of time in content security and anti-piracy. When you hold back content from authorized channels, people get pissed off and they're going to start to pirate it. But I also, looking at the overall market, I look at the music festival in and of itself has become a cultural phenomenon. These experiences are selling out before the promoters announce who the bands are. They've gone to multiple, 2 weekends back to back and are still selling out. And, people knock the music industry as having fallen, they victims of piracy, but they've woken up and they've redirected, and now they're being very strategic and successful with partners like Beats and Spotify. And if you look at, Coachella this year was live streamed on YouTube weekend 1 and lived on Access TV on weekend 2. So it solved both issues. But it didn't cannibalize audiences either way. And in fact, I would argue that a lot of people that watched the YouTube webcast tuned in to see cast on Access TV that following weekend.
Yeah, and I read a study that I think it's definitely going to enhance. I think it's definitely going to enhance. You have to have a bit of confidence in your content, but I think it's definitely going to enhance things for the networks. I read a study that said that even though millennials are watching most of their content time shifted, they're still watching a lot of premium TV. They're still watching a lot of primetime TV. In fact, the study I read from Yahoo said that was what they watched most. So people are still watching them. The question is then, if it's time shifted, how do advertisers address those eyeballs? And that's a question. But and the other thing is that eMarketer in April said that they were predicting that the ad revenues from YouTube were going to stay quite constant, but actually the ad revenues from the premium content platforms like Yahoo Screen and AOL On were actually going to go up because the advertisers want to be where the more premium content is, and because YouTube is a lot of UGC, they felt like the advertisers were moving to where the premium content is. So I think all of this comes together to say it's only going to enhance the world for content providers.
And when you say it's only going to enhance the multiple screens,
yeah.
Okay.
the ability to get things where you want.
And so in terms of traditional service providers, pay TV operators, we do this annual consumer video survey, and one of the questions we ask is, if you could have a single app from your cable TV provider versus multiple apps, one for each of my favorite channels, which sounds better to you? And overwhelmingly, people say a single app from my cable TV provider. And in fact, younger consumers are more likely to say, multiple apps. But even there, it's like more than 2/3 want that single app. Is there still when I interpret this, I look at this and I say it's pay TV operators' game to lose here. And I'm just curious about your thoughts. Do you see enough flexibility in traditional pay TV operators and the ecosystem to be able to absorb video and distribute it across multiple platforms, or do you see them, in other words, embracing OTT video?
I think this goes back to the point that I was making around really creating an even playing field for broadcasters, operators, and the consumers. So the scenario that you mentioned is obviously excellent for the consumer because you want a single place where you can go and find the content. If you talk to every single broadcaster out there, each of them is looking to create a unique experience around the way folks find their content, because a lot of their brand, in addition to the content, is also about the experience, right? So ESPN wants to create a very different experience around their content, around how they engage with the consumers than Univision or a news portal, right? So a lot of these sort of multi-platform experiences and discovery experiences that broadcasters are looking to create, in some ways, works contradictory to the whole I want to just get one Google search kind of box that enables us to search content across all of these experiences. So I think this is part of the challenge here, is how do you sort of create the right platform for the broadcasters, because the more unique the experience is, the higher premiums that they're going to get, because the more engaged the audience is going to be. On the other hand, you want to simplify the universe for the consumer. And this is why I think personally that the operators are actually very well positioned to sort of, as long as you create the right platform to create the right kind of user experience around discovery and personalizing the content, because they already have access to the content from the broadcasters and the relationship with the consumer. So that is probably going to be sort of the happy medium where this shakes out. But I don't think it's going to be going completely one extreme or the other.
I just want to, I have to say that, when we first heard the word TV everywhere, whenever it was coined, I think most people presumed the MVPDs would run with it and it would be one app with the MVPD. But again, I think it comes down to a rights question. And that the reason the broadcasters or the networks have dominated TV everywhere over the last few years is they have the rights. It's their rights, and they can go direct to consumer. They can put that iOS, Android app out there, and people can download
and go direct to the advertiser.
Yeah. And, other than those with the largest subscriber base have difficulty in securing those rights and kind of say, well, we're going to wait till the next contract cycle, then we're going to handle it. And so it's been a much slower ability from a rights perspective of them to put it on one piece of glass for the consumer. Absolutely. But I think it's hitting, those contract cycles are finally coming to a close, and the new ones, you're starting to see more of that. And I think it's going to change, but it's been slow to start.
I agree. I think the right side of it has shaped how it's evolved. And I think from looking at, the optimal solution for a consumer, it would be having a single solution. But to all the points, HBO Go, they want their experience. ESPN wants their experience. And quite honestly, I think what we'll find is the consumer is better off with them having separate channels. And then you go into the mode of, well, maybe they all have their little channel within one bigger app. But whoever makes the bigger app is going to want control over what sits in those channels, maybe controlling when those features get updated, controlling how much content's going to be there. There's a lot of things that they don't that to be controlled on their experience. So, and also when that whole app has an issue, is it an HBO issue? Because I'm watching it and it's failing, so I'm blaming HBO for their service. So I think ultimately we're all better off as consumers if they have their individual app and they can control that user experience and tailor it to what the consumer wants. And it'll actually even drive a common type of competitive environment where if you want to compete, you need to be at that level of having the right consumer experience. You're no longer captive to that service provider.
You might also end up with the lowest common denominator problem, because this actually, like you said, creates the incentive for HBO Go to be the first one to do 4K content versus others. So it creates sort of a competitive environment.
Yeah. So from a content provider perspective, now obviously you have the option of going direct. Let's talk about that. I'm sure other panels have talked about HBO and CBS and their announcements, and some question about what'll actually happen there. But how do you view the opportunities and challenges for content providers, but maybe John, also for advertisers to go direct, or brands to go direct, and what are the key success factors going to be there?
In the digital world, I'll give you an example. Working with American Express, they run a content experience called Unstaged, where they take an iconic venue somewhere in the country or in the world. They bring in a major music artist who's about to release a record, and then a famous, noteworthy director. So an example of that is John Legend and the Roots performing at Terminal 5 in New York with Spike Lee directing, or Duran Duran at the Mine with David Lynch. And we've done Coldplay at a bullfighting ring in Spain. This is all live streamed on YouTube and on Vivo. And American Express invests very heavily in that business. And their CMO gave a keynote at Meetum and acknowledged he reached 22 million people in that, I think, 6 shows a couple of years ago, and had an average view duration time of 25 minutes. And their belief at Amex is that they're not able to replicate that type of reach and engagement in any form of advertising that they're doing. And from a digital perspective, we see that in streaming is similar to television. A lot of what's happening in live, you get longer consumption, longer engagement, and a larger audience, especially when you bring in the ability that the consumer can switch the camera feed. And I can watch what's happening on stage 1 at Coachella or stage 2, or I can look at Spike Lee's feed online and switch to a different view inside the venue. But they can also talk and communicate and collaborate, which is they're not allowed, they believe, to do that in television. They can't live tweet and post and comment, participate in a widget that's a trivia widget or a polling gadget that lives inside of an ad unit. So for the advertiser like an Amex or T-Mobile delivering Coachella this year, on the festival side, they get a 60+ minute viewer duration time in some of these cases for a music festival. Pretty significant opportunities for them in that perspective on a digital platform.
And then if you're a content provider, what are some of the things you have to worry about if you are trying to establish a new over-the-top service? What issues is CBS going to run into? Do you all expect?
I mean, my perspective is in a funny way, they don't have a rights problem, they have a technology problem. And that's that the service provider owns the last mile to the consumer and the content provider doesn't. And so the way that like Netflix has solved that has been, with Open Connect and with, trying to get as deep inside the service provider's network as they can.
And lack of live.
Right. So that, I think there's some challenges if we're at the very beginning of, the hockey stick that we presume is going to be a hockey stick. What happens at scale is still a question mark, and how you can support like 4K at scale is still an open question from a technology perspective. Certainly given the current architecture of someone coming over the top, I don't know how that scales, frankly. I think it needs a different architecture. So I think that's the challenge of a content owner is how do you have a scale of something with the same quality and scalability of what people are used to with an over-the-top type offering.
The other point here, which we often forget, is also sort of organizational challenges between, in some of these larger companies who have done business a certain way for in some cases hundreds of years, right? Depending on the company. So, as you look at the new model, you have two different sort of content workflow organizations. You have two different ad sales organizations. So it's less about merging technology platforms. I mean, that's obviously a big part of it and delivering the kind of experience, but it's also merging the organization. So they think of this as a single experience, whether it's an iPad or a TV, as opposed to two different organizations with two different mission statements and two different set of incentives. Some organizations have gotten much better at this than others, but I think that's one aspect that we tend to gloss over as well, because that's a big part of making it successful.
Yeah, I think the challenge definitely is, as you say, it's building these platforms and then maintaining and running them with the right staff. And you can point to some runaway successes. Major League Baseball Advanced Media, super successful in that business. UFC, before they got all that television coverage, did almost everything online, which led to some of their broadcast deals. They still have a pretty robust online offering. So again, the cost and the ability to run these things it's pretty substantial. The good news is there are a lot now of companies that are very adept at building and running these platforms, and there's best of breed technology. A lot of the costs have moved into the cloud. It's a lot more economical and feasible to do this today than it was even 3 to 5 years ago.
I guess the other challenge is, are we going to have CBS for $5.99 a month, ABC for whatever, take every channel? Are we really expecting that all of these companies are going to be doing their own customer acquisition and marketing for their individual slices of available content in the world? Or, ultimately, does it come back to some kind of aggregation and distribution model where I can subscribe to one thing and get
It's kind of going full circle.
it seems like it could. I mean, I guess, a lot of it depends on the success and how much investment CBS makes in customer acquisition.
Well, and it's also when the consumer soon realizes that if they're actually watching 10 different channels, they will end up with the same subscription amount, which is often glossed over when people talk about a la carte. There are very few people that actually will stick to just one channel. And the moment you add, I want to watch news from here, I do desperately need to watch those live sporting events, and I really like this cooking show on this, and soon you will end up with a $50, $60, $70 bill. And then you might as well deal with a single bill, a single provider, a single experience. So I personally think the whole a la carte thing is great marketing speak, but doesn't really benefit the consumer.
Especially when you're a household with more than one person, you have a variety of different needs, and your kids are going to watch different content than you, and your wife may have other shows. So finally, you get into like 8 subscriptions, and it adds up, and you're back to your cable bill. And then you may not have quite the experience that maybe your quality of service was more consistent with the cable bill.
Yeah, I would just say that maybe the competition comes from outside, in the sense of, outside the kind of authenticated channels that live inside. I mean, I believe my children would be perfectly happy with YouTube. That's already got 90% of their viewing hours.
But then you get to the rights question again.
Right.
But I mean, I'm just saying that I think that the content's being created by, Amazon now, by, obviously by YouTube for a while now. And I think the question is just if that's, they're all making their bets, YouTube on an ad-supported model that will never, I mean, they experimented with some subscriptions, but it still seems to be principally around ad support and just access. And I think that's the way that you get down to just, well, I want to pay for my ISP and maybe not, a couple other channels, but that's how it gets down to it. And again, there's other uses of leisure time other than sitting in front of the TV and games and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's still an open question if that millennial and the next generation after wants to pay. I don't know what they do want to pay. But that's still an open question.
Yeah, I think it all favors Netflix, who's our largest service provider in the U.S. Essentially, if you can live with not having those premium windows and wait for your content, then all you need is the a la carte sports and you're in business. So I think the a la carte would help Netflix because people are going to start looking at all the different pieces and realizing that they can wait and view once it's in that window and they can fill with just the sports, Netflix volume will grow. I don't think people are going to start paying.
I don't know. I look at it like, I think Netflix spent $3 billion on rights this past year. And what does that buy? It buys you, House of Games and Orange or whatever, but it doesn't buy you, the HBO shows, and it doesn't buy you everything that's on prime time. And it's really, in terms of total viewer hours, I believe, Netflix, it's 6 hours a day per person. And I think they're at like 25 minutes per person if you take it across that. So they're still, for $3 billion, they're getting, 10% of the viewer hours. So it's going to be a lot more money. Either they're going to keep growing and they're going to spend $30 billion on content, but that's what to me, it takes $30 billion on content to get a bigger slice of the viewer hours.
At the end of the day, the content providers have the knobs they can turn on Netflix.
Right. Well, they just spend a lot more on content.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, to your point, Peter, we do this annual consumer review. Brand value of Netflix versus my cable TV operator and the survey, and we did this trade-off, this conjoint analysis. Netflix actually slipped in the 18 to 24-year-olds this year relative to last year after kind of steadily growing. And this is a qualitative thing, but I've heard a fair number of millennials say, I feel like I've watched everything there is on Netflix. So gigantic library, but the new content has to be constantly refreshed and it's really expensive. So I think you make a good point. And live TV, we're also seeing a lot of interest in millennials on seeing shows when they first come out. So it isn't all about on-demand viewing. There's still some, for very popular shows, still some magic around when a show first airs, and then making sure that you're keeping up with your friends and not getting, the surprises spoiled by your friends.
I hate to base too much of my market understanding on my kids, but it's pretty scary. Like when you think of, like, you talk about, like, Netflix is spending $3 billion on rights and they get 25 minutes. But I mean, if you look at what my kids graduated from watching people play Minecraft, for hours a day, to now, like, inexplicably, that's no longer cool. And they've moved on to a bunch of other shows, but all through YouTube's recommendation engine, of basically they'll click on this and they've moved out of that into other things that YouTube thought they'd enjoy. And they're watching those now, Dude Perfect and a bunch of other YouTube shows. But, none of this has anything to do with the traditional, way that content is created and licensed and so forth. So it's going to be interesting.
Let's see if anyone has questions in the audience. Here's one. Yes.
The question / comment. You guys were talking about a la carte. Everyone loves a big premiere, takes care of all the channels. But we know that typically the world is 70% lower class. You can offer them something that they didn't have a piece of before, right? At a price that they can afford. I think the numbers for these carriers will increase. And as money comes and goes, right? So if your money is high for 6 months, if you're a seasonal employee, then you can grab several pieces of this a la carte pie. And then as your money dwindles, you can knock off a few, and you can rise the low way and still have what you want. So I see nothing but additional dollars coming into this whole thing.
So I guess the question there is, do you think that service providers are appropriately segmenting their customer base to understand what the targeted offers might be to different segments, whether it's to millennials or other lower income parts of the population? What are your thoughts there?
I think the point that was being made by, I think, a couple of folks on the panel was, I think the a la carte pricing is going to coexist with the subscription model or the bundle model that exists today. I think you'll see a lot of press, though, that it's going to be all a la carte and the bundles are going to disappear. And I think that's what we were refuting, that's probably overblown, makes for good press release, but it's probably exaggerated.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Are you guys seeing, or do you have any thoughts on some of these OTT services on whether they're algorithmically programmed or human curated? Is there any good examples of, like, what you're seeing as kind of the best approach or strategy to that?
So I can go.
Because he's going to say analytics.
So we, all of our customers actually want, and all the broadcasters actually want a blend, because there is a lot of value in human curated content, in promoting content that you produce. In fact, our customers would also come and say, if you're showing me or showing our consumers a carousel of, let's say, 10 recommended videos, we want number 2 and 3 spots to be the content that we produce and promote, or something along those lines. And the main reason for that is, most of the existing recommendation systems are essentially collaborative filtering based. So some of these also tend to be self-fulfilling. And so, as you get more views, as you get a sort of a graph built around content consumption, that's the one that will continue to show up in recommendation systems. But you want to sort of break that. You want to promote new shows that people have never heard about, and also promote your brand as a result. And so every single one of our customers who look at analytics, who look at creating that personalized experience, want to have control over that end user experience by creating a blend of curated as well as algorithmically produced lists.
What would you say the percent? Is it like 50-50, or does it tip one way or the other?
More analytical. Depends on the size.
No, I think it depends. Yeah, it depends on the size of the customer. I mean, not all customers really have a large editorial team to deal with it, but the ones that do certainly want to have more control over that experience.
Yeah, and I actually thought your question was more around, what can we learn by crunching big data, perhaps on some new series that if we had this guy write it and this actress and it was a crime drama set in LA or whatever, that would be much more popular than something else. But were you going there as well or not?
No, I think, I think I work for a TV company that I think we often have battle with like doing the editorial team behind this too. Yeah, so it's just sort of what works the best.
Yep.
Got it.
I imagine you can get feedback too. If you're doing more analytical, you can start to see feedback. Are people actually watching my recommendations, right?
Yep.
And you can always run studies. A lot of times they'll part out the segment, and some people, they'll have more editorials in one group than another group to see what the net effect is, right?
Yes, Jason.
I was just thinking, somebody up there mentioned that we'll go full circle and somebody will create an aggregator. One of the reasons why, I think one of the reasons why it's more, that idea that might be more attractive to consumers, that, we're going to get CBS and Netflix and a couple things together and continue to build their own OTT collection. And they're going to pay more, possibly, than they would be paying an MVPD. That emotional gets rid of the resentment that I was putting myself in the place of that consumer, by the way. It gets rid of the resentment and paying for less stuff that you can choose. It's strange, but, I would for another conversation, but we've got thousands of channels on the grid. I think people look at it, if they're not properly curated what they want to see, they just get mad. They're like, I can't believe I'm paying all this, but I want to watch these three things and stop that. It makes me mad.
That's why I think the gentleman up here's question plays into the same thing. It's that I think the consumer is ultimately happy when he has all the options. And so if you give him the options to break it down to a la carte, but if you show him package deals where he says, wow, I'm going to buy these 4 a la carte, now I'm going to get all this extra stuff for about the same price, or maybe $1 more, he's going to feel more empowered to make a decision. Right now, the problem with service providers is you feel like you don't have the option.
I've seen some focus groups with, whatever, millennials that say that they're not price conscious at all. It kind of goes to what you say. And we already have an a la carte offering out there in iTunes, and they would say, yeah, I'm going to pay more just to get season passes to the 3 shows that I want, because then I can watch it at, it's cached on my device. So it always works. It always looks awesome. I take it with me wherever I go. I can watch it on any screen. It works for me. I can watch it by myself when I'm by myself. I can watch it with my friends. So it's worth the extra money for the whatever number of shows I'm really going to watch. I'll just own them. I'll buy them. No ads, that kind of thing. So I think that there's already, we haven't seen the numbers yet to say that, but in focus groups, I've seen that as basically saying I don't care if it costs more. It's what I want, so I'll pay for it. But
we've actually seen when we've done conjoint analysis with download as an option in addition to streaming, there is probably a couple of dollars incremental per month that you could get if you had download as a feature. So having that as an option, it does solve a lot of the problems from the consumer experience perspective with advertising, much better quality when I'm watching it, et cetera. Yes.
Any other next generation technologies coming up the pipe that we should be at least thinking of? I know Vantage TV did its live virtual reality broadcast of ACL Live this past weekend. I think C-Space is doing an augmented reality and layering in front of. Anything else next gen we should be mentioning?
And
I think
by the way, this is a great final question, I think. So feel free to add your ideas on where you see things going.
For sure, virtual reality, I think, is going to be a big potential moneymaker or enhancement to an experience. By virtue of my business now, I've started to spend more time in the electronic music business. and it's almost a vastly different culture. Everybody wants to participate in that experience, including the artists. You know, we'll do a big festival, and Eminem may not want to be in the webcast. That's not the case with all of the EDM artists, their agents, all of the stakeholders, and the attendees. And it does, I think, prove that millennials do want to pay. They'll pay a premium to go to these festivals and their destinations. And they're also involved in fashion and lifestyle brands, et cetera. And that Vantage TV offering at ACL is, I think, an indication of that. So now you can extend that experience into the home. And an electronic show, I'm learning, starts at like 6 at night and goes to 6 in the morning. And there'll be viewing parties on an Apple TV or some sort of device in someone's home. In the background is the festival music playing while they're having a party. And you can also bring in that virtual experience as well, where you can walk around the stage and see Tiesto performing. And the difference there too is what's happening in the arena. So when we do an Arcade Fire, Arcade Fire is 9 musicians who actually switch instruments on the stage. And it's about what happens on the stage. At an electronic show, if it's Paul Oakenfold or Deadmau5, it's what's happening in the entire arena, what the lighting is like, what the fashion is like. The entire performance is really the artist and how they interact with the audience.
I mean, if you're asking, to look forward 5 years and see what I think is going to be, first of all, I think using the type of metadata and the deep audience insights that we can gather today, what I think is going to, I imagine this my one big TV in my bed in my living room, which is a personalized experience for me. So I sit down and my TV knows it's me, and I'm getting programmatically bought ads for me, and I'm seeing the latest Jimmy Fallon clips that I wanted to see and the latest stuff from Netflix and HBO and all of that. And it's all there and it's all for me. And in the end, I'm still watching reruns of Friends. That's what I see in 5 years.
I'm sorry. What else is going to happen in the next 5 years? Technology, business model disruption, rights being unleashed. What else is going to happen, panel?
Smell-o-vision.
Well, I'm just going to say one other thing actually, and I think it's kind of it's on that side, right? And I really think that advertising is going to become more a conversation with the audience as opposed to talking at the audience. And I think we're going to see a much closer connection between, when we're talking about in our business in kind of short form online distribution, where the content and the ads are actually going to live in harmony together, where there'll be a situation where we can actually create branded moments where the ad and the content kind of work together to extend that moment, to extend the emotional relationship that the brands spend so much time working on to build with their users or potential users. And so I think that there's going to be a real development in advertising and how it relates to content and how content is that package is consumed. And I think that one of the things that I often say is don't underestimate the consumer. The only time you ever make a mistake is when you think people are dumb, right? So respecting the consumer, respecting them in terms of giving them really good ads. If it's native, if it's combined with pieces of content which happen to be related, that kind of thing, I think, is how we move forward in the ad content scenario.
I think one of the things you'll see is I think that the cost of the platform to build out an OTT service gets more and more reasonable, and also operating the service, that you're going to see a lot of these very specialized, a la carte services over the top that might be religious based, that might be any affiliation, that they're going to find and be able to target audiences throughout the globe. And one of the things that's interesting is we operate with services like Samsung's Media Hub and Video Hub, those types of services where the challenge is translating it and subtitles, and then you think about services where there might be a Rotana in the Middle East that wants their content available to considered expats who want to see that content, right? The challenge, it's a lot easier. You don't have to deal with translating it because everyone that from that region that's gone elsewhere wants to see access to that content. Now it's a really simple problem to solve, and you see it from, I think it was DirecTV that has a Rotana channel now that has, it's a say $40 a month, and you get a variety of channels, and it's incredibly profitable. And I think you see an investment from the satellite providers doing more and more of those. I think you'll see that grow. I think you'll see also channels popping up that are people looking at YouTube and other types of self-creation sites and being able to curate, find the talent on those, curate them, and then start offering those channels as premium channels and giving those artists the ability to get their own footprint on all these devices. I think you'll see a lot more of that, because I think that's where there's opportunity to make money.
All right. Well, we have hit our time limit. Please join me in thanking our panelists.